Throughout gaming's history, achievements alongside in-game counters relating to completion have consistently been a major part of nearly every game. Even in older titles, secrets are extremely common, with a portion of them only being possible through long playtimes, stumbling upon a hidden path, or requiring immense skill. Now, being a completionist is heavily incentivized through the various online achievement systems different platforms offer, allowing you to display your valuable achievements to everyone as a showcase of skill and dedication. At the same time, games themselves have expanded in scale, adding more items, quests, and collectibles, all tracked with counters that highlight how close you are to finishing everything. Everyone's opinion on whether you should 100% games varies. Some people are fully content with merely finishing the game and seeing the ending cutscenes roll to highlight their completion. Some of you potentially do particular side quests and stories to enhance the experience, and not take a substantially longer time than normally completing the game. Then there are people who are completionists, designed to do everything the game offers from minor quests to much more important parts, such as achieving different endings. Of course, this is technically not an incorrect way of playing a game, and certain people reasonably find specific playstyles to be more appealing. However, constantly 100% completing games has numerous downsides, stemming from trends of monotonous gameplay loops to simply brag to yourself or other people visiting your profiles. With that in mind, let's dive into the reality of completionism and why, for most games, it simply isn't worth the time or effort. For starters, one of the biggest reasons why reaching 100% completion is really worth the time or effort is that it only occasionally improves the overall experience of a game. Frequently, the process of fully completing a game does not align with the natural pacing or enjoyment found in simply playing through a story. Typically, when you're trying to achieve full completion, you attempt to finish objectives that feel disconnected from the core experience. The achievements that nearly every game releases with now are a clear example of this problem. A portion of the achievements are rewarding and feel meaningful, such as defeating the most difficult bosses, watching a major story moment in the game, or maxing out an important upgrade. However, many others fall into the exact opposite category. These require you to do obscure, repetitive, or tedious tasks that contrast the most engaging parts of the game, in favor of making them special. I'm not arguing this isn't important, but it simultaneously makes gaining achievements frustrating while hurting the gameplay experience, as it differs from the core game. This becomes even more noticeable once you reach the post-game, when the majority of the world's secrets, mechanics, and systems have already been shown in earlier parts of the game, leaving barely any exciting moments left. Once you start trying to acquire these achievements, the gameplay that remains is the least interesting content, turning the experience into a checklist of boring objectives designed to extend your playtime. As mentioned earlier, there are countless games that fall into this pattern when it comes to achievements. In fact, it's difficult to find games that don't follow this trend, as it's so commonplace, as well as shaping the entirety of achievements. One of the clearest examples, and one of the games that personally inspired me to make this video, is Persona 5 Royal. It was one of the longest games I ever 100% completed, giving me first-hand experience with how strenuous the process can be. Persona 5 Royal is a definitive edition of one of the most critically acclaimed JRPGs ever created. It improves on the original Persona 5 by a wide margin, adding an entire storyline while keeping everything that made it beloved initially. The game delivers an engaging story, a memorable cast, an iconic soundtrack with fitting themes, and a stylish combat system filled with flashy animations. With a 95 score on Metacritic and near universal praise, it is considered a must-play even for people who are not usually interested in the JRPG genre. When I first played Persona 5 Royal, my initial run took around 100 hours, which lines up with the average completion time for most players. Following that, I decided to start a new game plus, with the goal of finishing every achievement and claiming the shiny achievement you receive at the end for attaining all of them. At first, this sounded like a rewarding challenge, but I quickly realized how repetitive the process was going to be. Similar to other games, achievements were not connected to meaningful milestones. Instead, they required the player to complete random activities that added little to the overall experience. One achievement, for example, titled Easy Money, is tied to buying a lottery ticket, something many people realistically never do in a normal playthrough. The majority of people are not even aware of where the lottery is located, since the shop itself is missable. This is reflected in the completion data, as only 28% of players on Steam managed to unlock this achievement. That surprisingly low number even includes completionists, meaning the percentage of players who earned it during a standard playthrough is substantially lower. The process is straightforward, since the lottery becomes available a few hours into the game once free exploration is unlocked for the cities. All you need to do is purchase a ticket and then return a week later for the results. However, the problem is that the game doesn't provide any real incentive to seek it out, which makes it an activity most players would naturally overlook. Additionally, Persona 5 Royal is a massive game, and there's attractions scattered everywhere, making it annoying to boot or not discovering it even more plausible. I definitely had to view a guide for it on my New Game Plus playthrough, as I was unaware of the game having a lottery system. When we compare this with the thorough Trickster achievement, the difference becomes clearer. That achievement requires reaching the final 15 hours or so of the game, yet it was earned by 30% of players. The fact that more people reach the end of the game than bother to buy a single lottery ticket throughout the 100-hour playtime illustrates how impractical and forgettable certain achievements can be. The lottery is extremely simple, not being designed to significantly add to the overall experience of the game. Now there is some chance involved, but you only need the lowest reward, making it easy to win after a single time of playing. The rewards it offers are lackluster. In some cases, you can even end up losing money rather than gaining it. While there is a slim chance of earning a good payout, those odds are low, meaning most players will never see it happen. Even if you did get lucky, the impact is negligible, because money is not a particularly scarce resource in the game. Thus, the lottery feels less like a fun side activity to increase immersion of the city, and more like an afterthought that exists solely to lengthen the achievement list. This pattern is common across many achievements, existing without adding any sense of accomplishment. These achievements neither enhance nor detract from the gameplay experience. And while not every achievement needs to provide a big impact to the game, as that would be unrealistic, the point still stands. The most important aspect of any game is that it should be enjoyable. Every game, even those considered masterpieces, will have moments that frustrate players, such as repeatedly dying against a difficult boss. However, challenges like those are inherently tied to the main experience, and completing them feels rewarding because they are part of the intended journey and you continue to progress towards the end of the game. Typically require you to collect an excessive number of items, perform highly specific actions that no one would normally attempt, or in the worst cases, complete an entire playthrough under restrictive conditions. At that point, you have to wonder whether the enduring hours of unenjoyable gameplay is truly worth it for another platinum trophy or a perfect game on Steam. Gaming is, at its core, a hobby, and the experience should be enjoyable for most of the time spent playing. If the pursuit of an achievement takes away that enjoyment, then its value becomes questionable. This issue becomes even more noticeable in single-player games that are heavily story-focused. Once you finish the main story, even if the game allows you to continue exploring afterward, the world feels empty without the story, as that was the main goal of the game. Moreover, it can feel even worse in games that have a definitive ending, such as Persona 5, where you can't continue to play through you originally completed the game. In that case, you are forced to start a new game and replay countless hours to attain achievements or play content you missed the first time. Consequently, gameplay becomes a repetitive cycle of skipping cutscenes and dialogue you already witnessed, which quickly erases enjoyment. Personally, this was one of the biggest reasons why I disliked my New Game Plus run of Persona 5 Royal. For example, another one of the achievements I missed was completing every palace, which are the main dungeons of the game. While this is an achievement you expect most players to acquire naturally, I avoided looking up guides during my first playthrough since I prefer to figure things out myself in single player games unless I am stuck or I have already completed the main story, which I'm sure resonates with some of you. The problem was that I heard about the additional third semester in Persona 5 Royal, which is showcased as a major improvement to the game's story. I assumed this would appear after finishing the original playthrough and didn't require specific game actions. Instead, the credits rolled and I realized I had completely missed it. The only way to access it was to replay the entire game from the beginning, turning it aside a new part of the game into a frustrating chore for 100% completion. This goes back to what we discussed earlier regarding replaying story-driven games. In order to reach the third semester in the game, it took me about 50 hours of mindlessly spamming moves from overpowered personas against enemies and bosses while skipping through dialogue. Everything I was experiencing during that run was content I had recently played, and this would be the case for most players who attempt 100% completion immediately after finishing the main game. The sense of discovery that creates interesting gameplay is gone, being replaced with repetitiveness. Even for non-story driven games, replays of the entire game for new endings or for hard challenges such as not dying is common, much to some people's confusion. Of course, this can be a little different if you choose to replay a game years later as opposed to immediately finishing it. By that point, you potentially have forgotten parts of the story or gameplay, which can make it feel somewhat fresh again. However, it still does not carry the same satisfaction as the first playthrough, since the magic of experiencing everything for the first time is gone. When completion requires going through a game you just finished, the result is usually uninteresting gameplay. As we mentioned earlier, completing the game again ultimately worsened the experience for me. After finishing my first playthrough, the only tasks left were the achievements I missed, which required following guides and completed tedious objectives. The process quickly became monotonous to the point where I distracted myself by watching something on a second screen. By the time I reached a new storyline, I could barely enjoy it, as I had already invested 150 hours into the game. Although I still regard Persona 5 as a masterpiece, forcing myself to achieve 100% completion made the experience less memorable. Rather than adding to the experience or being neutral, in this case, it actually worsened it. Single-player games that emphasize combat or exploration can sometimes be more enjoyable to fully complete, since dynamic gameplay mechanics allow people to engage for hours without getting bored. However, the drawback is that even these games often include collection-based achievements. These are the same level of tediousness as being required to unlock every ending, complete every side quest, and more narrative-driven titles. Some games, especially larger-scale ones, even combine both approaches, making completion feel overwhelming. Collecting items really enhances the overall experience, particularly when there is little to no reward for the effort. Unfortunately, this is the case in many games, where collections feel grindy, and the rewards don't even provide upgrades or new lore. The process typically becomes dull, and you absolutely need guides to finish it in a reasonable time frame. This reinforces a larger issue with 100% completion. These massive collections are not designed to enrich the experience, but rather test how far someone is willing to go. They only make sense if you already enjoy the game enough to overlook the pointlessness, not if you're trying to get more out of the game itself. Ultimately, attaining every achievement in a game rarely enhances the experience. Most achievements are designed less to provide meaningful enjoyment and more to appeal to the desire to feel like a completionist. In the end, that sense of accomplishment is simply not worth the time or effort required. In combination with offering little to no value, pursuing 100% completion is also extremely time consuming. As we discussed earlier, it took me an extra 50 hours to reach the third semester in Persona 5 Royal, and around 60 hours total to achieve full completion. To put this into perspective, that was 60% of the time I originally spent playing the game, mostly devoted to miscellaneous tasks as opposed to meaningful progression. In comparison, the average length of a single-player game is about 15 to 25 hours, which means I could have played around 3 entirely new games in the same time it took me to finish unnecessary objectives. For most people, this trade-off becomes even harder to justify when considering the reality of the massive backlogs they need to slowly get through and the constant release of new titles. On top of that, older games continue to receive DLCs or content updates that draw players back in. With so much content to experience from everywhere in the gaming world, it makes more sense to spend limited gaming time on exploring new titles rather than extending one game solely for the sake of completion. While most achievements add little to the overall experience, starting and finishing a new game will consistently provide enjoyment. To illustrate just how time-consuming 100% completion could be, let's look at a few of the most popular games and compare the average playtime for the main story versus full completion. For this, we'll be referencing How Long to Beat, a site where players report how long it took them to finish games. It has been around since 2011 and is widely regarded as a reliable resource for estimated playtimes, whether for the main story, side content, or full completion. The numbers reveal how disproportionate the time commitment for 100% completion could be, altering what could have been a manageable experience into a long grind. First, let's take a look at Baldur's Gate 3, the 2023 Game of the Year winner. Even without going for full completion, it is already much longer than a typical single-player title, with the main story averaging around 72 hours. As a story-driven RPG, its length isn't surprising, since the genre is known for extensive narratives and layered mechanics. The game is packed with content, from lengthy cinematic cutscenes to memorable quests and plenty of lore. When it launched, you probably remember people being shocked by its scale. This trend of longer and more content-heavy releases has become increasingly common. In the case of Baldur's Gate 3, reaching 100% completion stretches to 72 hours to 174. That's nearly 2.5 times longer, changing an already lengthy game into a ridiculous time investment. Next, let's look at Super Mario Odyssey, one of the most critically acclaimed Nintendo titles to date. The game's creativity shines through the use of Cappy, which allows you to control enemies, permitting unique movement options and gameplay mechanics not seen in previous entries. The game is visually impressive as well, being one of the best looking titles that came out on the Switch. With 17 areas to explore, the game is filled with secrets and many objectives to complete to reach 100%. Mario games are generally known for being shorter experiences, only taking around 10ish hours to complete. This is primarily due to the level-based platforming structure, which naturally results in more concise playtimes compared to the unpredictability of RPGs or open-world games, where additional freedom is allowed. However, platformers also have a reputation for being filled with a surplus amount of collectibles, and Mario Odyssey is no exception. To reach 100% completion, players must collect a staggering 880 Power Moons scattered across the kingdoms. These moons are earned in a variety of ways, from defeating bosses and solving clever puzzles, to uncovering hidden areas, or completing tricky platforming challenges. While finishing the main story provides a satisfying adventure with an entertaining boss fight at the end, fully collecting every Power Moon after completing the main story significantly increases the total playtime. A standard playthrough of Mario Odyssey takes roughly 12 hours, which aligns with the expectations for a mainline Mario title. Collecting every Power Moon, outfit, and regional coin stretches that playtime though to around 62 hours, more than 5 times the length of a normal run. While Mario Odyssey is obviously an incredible game that feels fresh within the Mario franchise, the abundance of collectibles makes completion feel less rewarding and exhausting. Fully completing the game practically requires the use of a guide, since so many moons are hidden in unintuitive ways. What makes this particular 100% even worse is that unlike Xbox, PlayStation, or Steam, Nintendo does not have a built-in achievement system. As a result, the hours spent collecting everything merely amounts to personal satisfaction, as you can't showcase it on your profile, which makes the grind feel even less worthwhile. For the final game, let's go over Hollow Knight, because indie games are notorious for being more creative in their secrets and achievements. Thus, the typical shorter playtimes are extended through searching for these secrets. From viewing Hollow Knight's extensive achievement list, it's sensible that the 100% playtime will be time consuming. One of the achievements that stand out is called Still Heart, which involves completing the game on Still Soul mode and reaching 100% completion. Still Soul mode is unlocked after completing the game, guaranteeing you will need another playthrough besides your original. What's even worse is in Still Soul mode, there's permadeath, meaning dying once causes the save file to be deleted. So you have to beat the game and do all the typical things you need to do for 100% while not dying once. For the average person, this achievement is unattainable, even with guides detailing the best route to go on. As such, only 2% of people attained it, highlighting they truly wanted to make Hollow Knight's achievements special. There's other playthroughs as well, including an achievement considered speedrunning with the requirement of completing a 27-hour game in only 5 hours. These extra playthroughs are combined with the usual collector ones, such as the one about rescuing all the grubs, which are placed around the map in glass containers that need to be broken. For its hour increase, it's over a 2 times increase at 62 hours, heavily impacting your playtime and experience with supplemental playthroughs. Typically 100% completing doesn't require an immense amount of skill, but Hollow Knight differs due to its already challenging gameplay and subsequent harder runs with stipulations. As these examples show, striving for 100% completion is both time-consuming and ultimately unrewarding, since it really adds meaningful value to the overall experience. Unless you are a devoted fan of a particular game, the effort is simply not worth it. Your time would be better spent moving on to the many new exciting releases, or revisiting older titles you have always wanted to play. There's an endless amount of games to play nowadays, but 100% completion takes your attention away from them for a minor amount of satisfaction at the end with boring gameplay throughout. Apart from being time consuming, going for 100% completion can also lead to burnout, not just within the game you're trying to finish, but in gaming as a whole. The more you force yourself to fully complete games, the more likely it becomes you begin viewing them as tasks rather than a fun hobby to pass time. Instead of immersing yourself in the story, exploration, or combat, you may find yourself chasing another platinum trophy, a perfect game. During playthroughs, this means dividing your attention between side quests, collectibles, and constant checks of achievements to ensure nothing is missed. Certain games will require specific actions to be done at different moments, and also you need to play the entire game. Over time, this shift in focus can make gaming feel like a chore, as the sole purpose of you playing them is to 100%. We've already mentioned how 100% completion can damage the experience of a single playthrough, but let's go over the negative effects that impact multiple games and result in burnout. For starters, the process is simply time consuming. After finally finishing an annoying completion run, it can be difficult to motivate yourself to move on to another game, especially if the experience was not enjoyable. You become engrossed in the game's world. Studies on burnout consistently highlight repetitiveness as one of its main causes, and this applies perfectly to completionist runs. Not only are you replaying the same game for an extended period, but you're also repeating specific tasks such as collecting hundreds of items or grinding to upgrade everything to the maximum level. Spending hours on these objectives can make gaming feel less exciting overall, which again shifts the meaning of it. Furthermore, chasing 100% completion often creates the habit of feeling like every future game must also be fully completed. Playing a game without doing so can start to feel incomplete, leaving you constantly wanting more. This is how people become completionists, and you can view multiple posts online regarding how it's almost impossible to stop doing it, since the process itself requires so much effort without being enjoyable. This mindset can quickly lead to burnout across gaming as a whole. This was exactly what happened to me with Persona 5. While I was grinding for every achievement, no other game I played, whether single or multiplayer, felt nearly as enjoyable as it usually did. Replaying Persona 5 was relatively boring, and that monotony went into my overall experience with gaming. When I finally attained all the achievements, these feelings went away, but that sense of accomplishment alongside it faded quickly. Part of this experience can also be linked to post-game depression, which is a sense of emptiness players feel after completing a beloved game. The longer the playtime, the stronger this feeling tends to be, since you have the chance to become deeply attached to the characters and the world. The same phenomenon can be seen in other media, such as finishing a favorite show. Personally, while I wanted to move on to something new after playing a massive scale of Persona 5, it was difficult to do so. Despite the fact that 100% completion rarely adds to the experience, it sometimes increases the risk of burnout and consumes an enormous amount of time. Many people continue to pursue it, even knowing they can spend that time playing other games or engaging in more fulfilling activities. The pull of completing everything a game has to offer remains strong. If you haven't personally experienced the urge to 100% a game, the mindset to do so may seem confusing. However, it becomes clear when compared to other hobbies or tasks outside of gaming. For instance, when creating an art piece, most people naturally want to finish what they started rather than abandon it midway and move on to something else. The same principle applies to most significant commitments such as school or work, where months or years of effort increase the desire to get what you want out of it. Gaming is no different in this regard. This underlying drive to finish what has been started is a major reason why time-consuming, difficult, or competitive games have become so popular and possess the most players out of all games. They thrive off our psychology to finish tasks despite facing challenges or boredom. This tendency is closely tied to something called task persistence. Task persistence refers to the ability to continue an activity despite obstacles or setbacks. While everyone has this trait to some degree, the amount varies from person to person. In the context of gaming, many people choose to abandon titles during their playthrough due to difficulty, boredom, or simply wanting to play something new. Yet others are compelled to finish every game they start, and in some cases, go for full completion. Task persistence happens by having a goal in mind and the determination to overcome challenges to achieve it. For completionists, the objective centers on the satisfaction of fully finishing a game. When they revisit their game library in the future, they want the assurance that nothing remains incomplete, and that they can look back on their playthrough with a sense of finality. That particular sense of accomplishment feels unique because you can stop playing believing you have experienced everything the game has to offer, which potentially makes it easier to move on. For completionists, it can be especially challenging to resist going after that feeling. The problem is that satisfaction is short-lived. You might feel fulfilled in a moment, but it fades quickly once you start playing something else. In my case, I don't really think about my 100% completion of Persona 5 anymore. Well, besides creating this video, of course. It is nice seeing it listed among my perfect games, but again, in a week, it was no longer on my mind. You probably feel the same way since there's nothing meaningful you can do with it. The brief satisfaction is not worth numerous hours of work and research at different sources for guides, the negative impact of enjoyment, or the risk of burnout and repetitiveness. If you can recognize the diminishing return while you're still playing, the drive for completionism becomes much weaker and it becomes easier to move on. It helps to concentrate on the lasting experience you gain from starting something new rather than a temporary reward of 100% completion. Overall, you may be motivated to finish everything in a game, especially if you usually 100% games you play. But if you step back and consider how quickly the feeling fades, you can avoid this seemingly never-ending cycle altogether. Without that fleeting sense of accomplishment, the main reason for 100% games disappears, highlighting the typical pointlessness of it. Considering these reasons and many others, 100% completing games does not enhance the experience. Instead, it often worsens it, consuming excessive time, creating burnout, and leaving players with a fading sense of satisfaction that is rarely worth the effort. Achievements are largely designed as profile trophies to showcase, which is why developers often make them deliberately difficult or tedious. While there are rare cases where it can be enjoyable, those are exceptions. And generally, 100% playthroughs are wasting your time by taking high amounts of effort. The longing for total completion hurts the joy of gaming, turning what should be a source of entertainment into a list of repetitive tasks that add minimal value. Falling down the trap of completionism for one or at worst multiple games can have terrible implications and cause you to lose the entire mania of gaming as a whole. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for the next video.